If you haven't done so already, go ahead and take a seat. Merry Christmas, C3. Thanks for joining us at this festive of all weeks leading up to Christmas Day. But I'll be honest with you, I'm not feeling it. No, I'm not feeling it. I'm not. It's been so busy, and it feels like December has literally flown by. I don't know if we had a late Thanksgiving or, my watch is off or something. Just, it feels like it's gone by really fast. And now here we are, the week of, and I'm just not feeling it. I don't know. Okay, I'm feeling a little, and I'm sure throughout this week as the days go by, there'll be this small little spark, inside that will turn into a flame. And, once we get everything put away as far as, stuff that we know we need to do before Christmas, I think then I'll finally kind of okay, it's getting closer. Everything's checked off the list. And so I can finally relax, but it's hard to know exactly when we're going to get to that point. There's so much that our culture expects to be on Christmas Day, and sometimes we get caught up in all of those expectations. It's hard for us to get in the right kind of mood to celebrate this event which changed the world. And that's what we've been trying to capture in this series. How can we get back to, I don't want to say simpler time, but a clear message about what we have the opportunity to celebrate when we gather for Christmas? And so throughout this series, we've been considering how Jesus' birth was the event that changed the world, and how because this event is too big for any one person to fully understand or comprehend, we tend to celebrate it in a lot of different ways. So a couple weeks ago, I started the series where we just talked about how this event is too big for us to keep for ourselves. We need to celebrate it with others. And then last week, Pastor Adam talked about how, this event transforms us from the inside out. And one of the ways that we can express that is not only through worship, which is what we're doing right now, but through singing songs, just letting out the story of the good news through song. And I know a lot of you last week got to come back on Sunday for that amazing Christmas concert that Jan and the worship team and some of her special guests got to put on. And that was a great way to celebrate. But there's one more way that I want us to consider that we can celebrate the event that transformed the world. And it's a way that's very near and dear to our hearts as Americans. It's the ritual of giving gifts. That idea that Christmas morning is a day when we can exchange gifts with one another is one of the ways that we very often as Americans celebrate this event that transformed the world. But do you know at least one of the ways that we came to be a place that celebrated through gifts? Now, I know some of you probably have heard of Old Saint Nick, right? We've got some songs that have, but do you know the story of Old Saint Nick? You see, there was this bishop of Myra. His name was Nicholas, and because of the things that he did, he became known as popular. His nickname, if you can say his nickname was Saint Nick, his nickname became Saint Gift, and he was a Christian who lived in the town of Myra around 300 AD, so he's old Saint Nick, and gift giving for him was one of his ways that he expressed his Christian faith. And there's lots of stories about different gifts that he would give, and one of them in particular, he typically would give gifts to people who were poor. And so there was this family that had 3 daughters, and because they were so poor, just to get by, they were debating whether they'd have to sell these daughters off in order to survive. And so old Saint Nick got wind of that, and so he would stealthily sneak over to their house and chuck bags of coins. I would imagine he'd do it like this, just over the head there, through an open window. And because of his generosity, this family was able to make their ends meet, and these girls were saved from the future that uncertainly would have been a horrible fate for them. So because of his generosity, gift giving has always surrounded this holiday. And so you can actually get online. There was actually a website called stnicholascenter.com and find out all the different all the different nations where gift giving is given from over 40 different areas of the world. So there's places in Scotland and Serbia and Slovenia and Slovakia and that's just the S's, all celebrate the Christmas holiday through the giving of gifts. And so I think that's something that we could take a look at here in the Bible story of Jesus' birth, because there is something unique to our Christian faith that allows us, through the freedom that Christ gives us, to be the kind of gift givers that could truly make an impact in our community and on our world. And so that's going to be today's big idea. One of the ways that we can celebrate the event that changed the world is to celebrate through gifts. That gift giving can be a unique Christian practice that not only displays our care for other people, but allows us to display the gift that we have received in Jesus and to make his story known. So throughout this series, we've been looking at the biographies around Jesus' life and how they tell the story of him coming into the world. And so we're going to do that today. We're going to be looking in Matthew's gospel. Matthew writes about Jesus and about his birth. And we're going to be taking a look at chapter 2 in that book, and a story that a lot of you have probably heard or seen on TV before, the story of the 3 wise men who bring their gifts to the baby or toddler, as we'll see, Jesus. So let's go ahead and dive in. Matthew chapter 2, we're going to look at the first 12 verses, and that's basically going to tell us the whole story in one shot. Matthew writes, "Now, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, 'Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star when it rose, and we have come to worship him.' When Herod the king heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And assembling all of the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them, 'Where is the Christ to be born?' And they told him, 'In Bethlehem of Judea, for so it was written in the prophet,'" and this is the quotation, "'And you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel.' Then Herod summoned the wise men secretly and ascertained from them about what time the star appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, 'Go, search diligently for the child, and when you found him, bring word back to me so that I may come and worship him too.' After listening to the king, they went on their way, and behold, the star that they had seen when it rose went before them until it came to rest over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy, and going into the house, they saw the child with Mary his mother, and they fell down and worshiped him. Then opening their treasures, they offered him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they departed to their own country by another way." So it's a couple Christmas spoilers here, and Adam mentioned some of these last week, but I just got to get them out here. Christmas spoilers, here it goes. Number one, these gifts, the gold, frankincense, and myrrh, these aren't birthday gifts for Jesus. I'm sorry. This is not Jesus receiving his birthday presents at all. In fact, and Adam did mention this last week, so it wasn't me, it was Adam. The wise men probably come a little later in the story of Jesus' birth. Probably not right there at the moment he is born. And in fact, Matthew kind of says that. If you notice the very first verse, it says there, "Now after Jesus was born." So the star probably went up at the time of his birth, and so they got to pack up the camels, and hey, it's a long trip from the east, probably Babylon. So this may be a couple weeks, months, maybe a year or so, where these guys are showing up with their gifts. So these aren't baby Jesus's birthday gifts. I'm sorry. I mean, who gives a kid gold anyhow? you know he's going to stick it in his mouth. You know he's going to do that. Like, so why are they doing the gifts? Okay, that's an important point, and I think one that they, in fact, explain right off the bat. I know it was a big reading. Let me just read the little snippet, 1 to 3 here, that really describes why they're doing this gift giving. It says, "Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came to Jerusalem, saying, 'Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we saw his star,'" etc., and so forth. And so that is the reason why they are bringing gifts. And it may not be something, so like in America in the 21st century, gift giving is almost always associated with birthdays, but not necessarily associated with when a new king is born, right? We don't probably think in those terms, but in the first century, you better bet that's exactly what they understand this event is all about. Because in first century culture, anytime you were invited into the presence of a superior, however that culture defined it, you would be absolutely expected to honor that meeting by bringing certain gifts as just a way to acknowledge I'm entering in the presence of someone who is superior in this culture to me, and so here's a gift so that I can honor you and acknowledge who you are in this moment. And so that's definitely what they're doing. Baby Jesus is the king. They're coming and they bring gifts because they are in the presence of his kingship. Now, so that's a little backstory there. Anytime I read the Bible story, I'm always trying to think about how all the different players in the story are probably reacting. So that's where they're coming from. But you ever, maybe it's just me, we ever think about how's Herod feeling about this moment? You know, I kind of picture him seeing the camels roll up the driveway, and I don't know, maybe he looked out and saw some gifts hanging off the side of the camels. Pure speculation, but I'll go there. And he sits there and he's probably, he's thinking that these gifts are for him, He's a legitimate king, right? And certainly when new visitors pop in unexpectedly, it's polite to bring a few gifts, and they walk in, they say, who's this guy? No, we're here for the one who's born King of the Jews. And Herod just wah, wah. He just gets completely deflated in that moment. And this, I think, would have set him off. This would be a Herod trigger moment, because what we know about Herod, this first century Herod, he was called Herod the Great. Not by everybody, but by the people he paid. And he was called Herod the Great because he liked to do a lot of great things for his name. If you've ever watched the movie, my wife's favorite Christmas movie, The Nativity, they get this aspect of who he is spot on, because they show him in the middle of a building project, administrating, and that's what he was known for. He was a great administrator. He got things done, and he built tons of buildings, the temple, and other things that were all kind of monuments to his name. And in order to do that, for him to be that kind of king, that great king, he taxed his people rigorously and violently opposed anybody who refused to acknowledge his kingship. In fact, we know later on in his life, even his own family didn't get a pass, and he would attack any of them who he thought they might threaten his rule. And if you know the story here in Matthew at all, you know later on he attacks the children in Bethlehem to make sure that there is no other threat to his kingship. Because that is the picture that Matthew is setting up here, that there are two competing, vying kings in Jerusalem at this particular moment. Him and the one who was born King of the Jews. Notice that in this slide here, Matthew puts these concepts right next to each other. Here's Jesus. He has been born king. and here's King Herod. And now he's hearing about both of these kings who are kings over the same land, at the same people, at the same time. They are competing kingdoms in that particular moment. And so Jesus is a clear and present danger to King Herod, and he knows it. And he knows it. Now, this concept of these dueling kingdoms is something that the Bible frequently talks about. And so I'm going to kind of just step away from the text for a second, but in the Bible, you frequently hear of this concept of there are competing kings and kingdoms in this world. And one of them is the kingdom of this world. It's just the way that everything naturally operates in this world. Power, money, prestige, fame, all of those things are the gears, in the machinery turning and cranking the way that the world works. And Herod is, I think, a perfect representation of this kingdom, because here he is at this point in the story. He's probably about 70 years old, and so he spent the majority of his life operating in this kingdom, giving and receiving bribes and making a great name for himself and making sure that any threats to his rule are violently put down. And because he's the one on top, he's the king of the kingdom, everybody underneath of him has to honor him. And the way that he takes honor from them is by vigorously taxing them and stealing things from the people in order to make his name great. And that is the kind of kingdom that this world typically offers us. Just to generalize for a moment, like when we live in that kind of world and we worship the things that the world worships, so power, money, prestige, fame, that's when we're living in that kind of kingdom, and it taxes us in order to make it great. Last week, Adam talked about the concept of worship. I thought he made a really good point saying that, that word worship that we talk about, in its English background, it comes from two words, worth and ship. So the things that we consider worth, our time, our talents, our money, those are the things that we put up as kings. They don't have to be people, they can be things that we prioritize and make important to us. And as long as we're taking the things of this world and elevating those as the highest things in our lives, they will always tax us in order to make them great. And we will never find the freedom and the satisfaction and the joy that Jesus' kingdom offers here, because we're making those things great. And that joy is something that the wise men have. Here they come, and they're offering gifts to a different king. And notice in the story, they're not required to do that. This is a free gift that they're doing. Jesus isn't taxing them. This is a moment of extreme joy. Like, I think Matthew 2 says, when they saw the star come over, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. It just like keeps throwing words out there. They're so happy to have this moment of honoring the new king. And yet, even though they're that excited, they don't even know the full story. They don't even know what we know about what's going on in that moment. We don't even know what Matthew wants us to know, because before chapter 2, Matthew writes chapter 1. That's how those things work. 1 comes before 2. And in chapter 1, he tells us something about this Jesus that we as the reader should be amazed about, and would even drive us to have more joy than the wise men. Because this is what he says about this child being born. And just for context, an angel's visiting Mary and telling her this about the baby. This is what it says. It says, Mary will bear a son. You shall call his name Jesus, for he shall save his people from their sins. And then that's the end of the quote. And then all this took place to fulfill what the Lord had spoken by the prophet. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. The angel came to announce a brand new kind of king, one who was coming to give a gift, to deliver people from their sins. You know, this tendency inside all of us to prioritize the stuff that ends up taking more from us than it ends up giving. The self-destructive ways that we all tend to fall into when we're thinking in terms of how do we live and exceed in the way that the world measures success. That's what this baby has come to save him from. But he's not just any baby. He's just not any baby. Just another king from a long line of kings. Here, Matthew's telling us that in the birth of this child, God has come to be with us. That this child brings the presence of God down to his people so that he can live and reign and walk amongst them. So you might even say that in Jesus, God, the King of all creation, approached us with a gift. So in this birth of Jesus, the way that the world typically operates gets flipped over onto its head. In the first century, you would never, ever think about approaching a king without a gift. Honoring your superiors in that culture was a huge issue. And if you failed to follow the proper protocols when it came to approaching a king in that day, it just wasn't that it would cost you some time or some fame. It wouldn't have just cost you some embarrassment if you showed up to a king without a gift. In some instances, it could have cost your life to show up without a gift to a king in that culture. And yet, in Jesus, the King himself approaches us, offering himself as a gift. And this message of grace, forgiveness, and love is so beyond what the world can comprehend that it ends up leading the very world that the gift is offered to offer him and his life as the gift. At Christmas, this is what we celebrate. That there's a new way to be free, that there's a new way to find life, that there's a new way to live because of the King who has come down. At Christmas, we get to celebrate the event that changed the world because in this moment on Christmas Day, we see the values of this world utterly transformed and blown out of the water in an unexpected way. At Christmas, we get to celebrate the event that changed the world because here we see a message of love and mercy and grace that is so great that even we can't contain it. We need to celebrate it with others and through song and through giving of gifts. Because here at Christmas, we see the event that transformed the world because we see the King who is God over all, coming to offer his all and extend that invitation to all of us. And that's just one last point I want to make before we kind of get to the next steps and things, that this gift is truly offered to every single one of you. You know, we read this story and there are some elements here that I think we can miss, but something in the whole reversal that Matthew is trying to show us here is about who thinks they ought to receive this gift. So think about the story again. This story that Matthew tells us here, the most unlikely people who are getting the message and receiving it are the ones who get it. So in the story, the people you would think would get that a new king has arrived is Herod, right? So here's Herod, and not only Herod, but Herod calls together like all the king's horses and all the king's men, right? He gets the chief priests and the scribes and all the experts. And Herod holds, when the wise men come, Herod holds a Bible study and says, hey, where is this king going to be born? And they got the highlighters out, and they got some charts and protractors and a calculator, and they're crunching the numbers, and they say, Bethlehem. It's going to be in Bethlehem. I got a good feeling on this, Herod. It's going to be there. And then they announce that it's going to be in Bethlehem, and they sit there and do nothing. They sit on their hands after they figured it all out, and they do nothing with the good news. And then there are these three wise guys who they're magi from the east, which basically means these are probably Babylonian astrologers. Babylonian astrologers, which if you know your way around the Bible, those two things are not what you would expect would be getting the message. And yet there they go, offering their gifts, rejoicing that Jesus has come as a gift for all. So whether you're here and this is like the first time you've ever heard the Christmas message, or if it's like the 50,000th time you've heard this Christmas message, there is something here for you to receive. Make sure that if you're in the 50,000 category, you don't stick your hands in your pocket and miss this gift that Jesus is giving. And if this is the first time you hear it, receive this gift with joy. He comes offering a kingdom and a way of life that turns everything around and changes us from the inside out. And so let's not sit in our hands. Let's do something with this message. There's lots of ways you could respond to this message. I'm just going to highlight two really quickly here as just means of guidance. So what are some potential next steps here? Like, I think following, the story that we see here and even the example of old Saint Nick, I think as Christians, we have a unique way that we can be generous towards the world because God has so been generous towards us. So here's some possible ways that we could do that. One, obviously, I want to invite all of you to come back for Christmas Eve and give a gift to the world. So we're hosting 3 Christmas Eve service, 1, 3, and 5. And like every year, we do collect an offering at that service. But here's what we want to do. Because God has come to give a gift to others, what we want to do on Christmas Eve is take every dollar that we collect and earmark it to go back out into our communities. So this is not going to be about us as C3. This is going to be about us gathering together and just celebrating what God has already done in this church and how faithful he's been and how he's brought us through this year, and still take and give towards our community through the collection that we have that day. We think that is the right way that we can gather and celebrate this gift to the whole world, by giving something back to those outside of the 4 walls of this place. It reminds me a little bit of a story that Jesus, or an image Jesus gave to his followers. He told them one time that he said, if you're going to throw a party, throw it for the people who can't necessarily pay you back. He said, make our generosity about a one-way street, because that is the way that God has loved us. Let's not be a strings attached kind of gift givers. Let's pour it out and model the love of God in that moment. So that's one thing that we can do. Kind of following in that same vein is honor others in the gifts that you give them this Christmas. And I know it's a little late to order from Amazon right now, so I'm not saying you have to buy more gifts, right? So you can breathe easy on that one. But I think this is just an attitude change that we can experience by letting the message of Christmas really kind of sit on us for a moment. Undoubtedly, you're all geared up next Saturday to give gifts out. And that's good. I think that's a great way that we can celebrate what Christmas means. But are we able to pause and really feel that we have received so much from God on that Christmas moment, that when we give to others, we're resounding with that joy towards them, saying, God has honored me through giving me the life of his son. And as I give you this gift, I just want you to experience, and this could be an attitude. You don't have to say this out loud, but this is like a Hallmark moment here. Guys, write this down. In this moment, I'm giving you this gift because you're the gift to me. God has so changed my perspective through my understanding of what Christmas is. I see the people around me as the gifts that I have already been given. And so in this moment, I'm just offering this back to you, but all it's saying to you is, I see you and I receive you as what God has uniquely placed in my life. And allow our attitudes to be transformed by the gift that changed the world. Because undoubtedly on Christmas, you'll probably spend time with those who are closest to you. And it's always easiest to take for granted those who are closest to us. So don't celebrate that way this year. Pause and acknowledge the gift of the people all around you. And let that change the way that you give gifts. Because true gift giving is an act of freedom. True gift giving comes out of a heart that realizes, I have received so much from God, and I have the opportunity to give back to others because of how generous he has been to me. And so true gift giving always finds its true hope in the message of the gospel, of Jesus's gift to us. And it's easy, like me, I've been so busy coming up to this holiday that it's been hard for me to kind of get in the right mental zone, and I'm sure I'm going to get there, but it's so easy for me, and I'm sure you as well, to forget about that and just get busy with some of the ways that our culture promotes Christmas. And a lot of it's just the way of the world. It's about stuff and money and, getting all the right things and looking the right way. And we can all get caught up in that and get stuck in that kingdom way of thinking. And trust me, that way of living only taxes you, like Herod. It will drive us into the ground and never give us the joy that we're looking for. But when we come to understand the gift that Jesus has given to us, the fact that in his life, he comes as the king over all, offering a gift of all to all of us, then we can find a joy that leads us to celebrate. And it'll lead us to celebrate with others. Because when we look at Jesus and his birth, we're going to say, wow, other people have to enjoy this. And it's going to lead us to sing and celebrate through song. And here in a moment, we're going to have the worship team come back up, and they're going to lead us in a song about the goodness of God and his generosity towards us. Make that a way that you get your heart in gear for Christmas. And yes, we can celebrate through gift giving as well, whether on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve, allowing our minds to be transformed by this event so that we are different in the way that we live. Christmas is the event that transformed the world. I don't care if you're anywhere in the world, you're going to find where Christians are celebrating, whether it's Scotland or Slovenia. There's all kinds of places in the world where the message of Jesus is known because it cannot be contained. It's designed to transform you. And so Christmas is the event that changed the world because it is the event that has come to change your world. Let's pray. Father, thank you again for your gift to us, that we can be still in this moment and receive something from you, the gift of your grace, the life of your Son, the one who has come to deliver us from our sins. And so we pray for transformed minds and hearts, that the good news of Jesus would lead us to be different, not to sit on our hands, but to go and to offer our lives back to you and those around us because we have received you as our gift. And we pray this in his name.